So welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to this virtual community meeting to discuss NPA 2023-0020.01. My name is Maureen Meredith. I work for the City of Austin Planning Department. If you haven't done so already, please let us know who is here by typing your name in the chat box. If you're associated with an organization, please provide that as well. I'll use this as a sign-in sheet. Please mute your microphone if you're joining by phone, and please turn off your video if you're participating online to save bandwidth. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment cases website. If you do not want your image viewed publicly, please turn off your camera. So as you know, this property is in the South Congress Combined Neighborhood Planning Area, the East Congress Sub-Area. Again, the plan amendment case is NPA 2023-0020.03. Kathleen Fox will be the meeting facilitator tonight. She's also with the Planning Department. Again, my name is Maureen Meredith. I'm also with the Planning Department, and this is my contact information, my email, and my phone number. Nancy Estrada is with the Planning Department. She is a zoning case manager and also provided us her email and phone number. So the agenda tonight, I'll go over basic case information, guidelines for group discussion, how to participate in this process, why is there a plan amendment application, what is a future land use map, also called a FLUM. I'll do a brief presentation, then Leah Bojo, the applicant's agent, will do a presentation. Then we will open the meeting to questions and answers. So basic case information, the property addresses are 300, 400, 436, and 440 Industrial Boulevard and 4211 Willow Springs Road. It is 1.38 acres. NPA case number is NPA 2023-0020.03. The project name is 30 to 400 Industrial Boulevard, NPA. The proposed change to the future land use map is a request to go from industry to mixed use land use. The associated zoning case number is C14 2023-0044. The proposed zoning change is to go from LI Limited Industrial District Neighborhood Plan to LI PDA NP Limited Industrial District Plan Development Area Neighborhood Plan for residential and retail uses. There's the property owners are, I'm not sure if you pronounce it or just LEIFINDUS 300 LLC and LEIFINDUS 400 LLC. Leah Bojo is with Drenner Group, and she is the agent representing the property owners. Guidelines for group discussion. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time during this meeting. Please postpone general comments during the Q&A session. After staff and applicant presentations, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol on the menu bar. Telephone participants will be able to speak during the Q&A session of the meeting. Attendees will be muted upon arrival and through the staff and applicant presentations. Then staff will open the floor to answer questions in the chat or by attendees raising their hands to speak. Similar questions may be grouped and answered together. And if you're having connection issues, please turn off your video until called upon to ask your question. We ask that you be respectful to each other during this meeting. And also for telephone participants, when we get to the point where we're going to ask if you want to ask a question, we'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. How to participate in this process. As I mentioned earlier, the recorded meeting will be posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment website. It'll be posted tomorrow morning. You can email or call me and Nancy with any questions or comments that you have. If you have written comments, they'll be included in the staff case report. And when the cases are scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council, you'll get a notice in the mail if you live within 500 feet of the property. You can participate virtually or in person, and the meeting notice will have instructions on how to do that. So why is there a plan amendment application? Neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. The city charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and most neighborhood plan amendments are amendments to a plan's future land use map. And most neighborhood plan amendment cases have an associated zoning application. So this map shows the areas in blue that have City Council approved neighborhood plans. Neighborhood planning areas have a plan document that have the vision and goals of the planning area in text form, and also a future land use map. The future land use map shows colors that represent broad land uses. For example, purple is represented by industry, mixed use is represented by brown, multifamily by orange, commercial by red, etc. So this property currently has industry land use, so it is purple, and the proposed land use is mixed use, which would be brown. So that's a zoomed in of the future land use map of the purple land use. And the brown to the north and a little bit to the east and west and south is the mixed use. Here's an aerial photo of the property just south of East Bend White to the east of South Congress Avenue and at north side of Industrial Boulevard. Here's a Google map that shows some of the surrounding uses to the property. Again, a future land use map overlaid over the aerial photo. Zoning map that shows the current zoning as LI, Limited Industrial Services District. Neighborhood plan. And some of the zoning to the north is LIPDA, and that's Plan Development Area. This is the map from the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. It is the growth concept map. It is zoomed out and you can see all the areas that is designated as regional centers, town centers, neighborhood centers, and also activity corridors. So when you zoom into the property, you can see where the property is within those activity centers and corridors. So you see South Congress is an activity corridor. It's properties just south of St. Edwards. The yellow represents a neighborhood center. To the bottom right of the screen, you see McKinney Center, which is a job center, and also Dove Springs, which is a neighborhood center. So this map shows the public transportation adjacent to the property. You see some bus routes along South Congress Avenue and also some along East Bend White. And that concludes my presentation, and Leah can start hers.
Sounds great. Thank you, Maureen. I will turn my camera on if that's okay while I share my screen. All right, so I will try to go through a lot of the things I'll show are similar to what Maureen showed, maybe in a little bit more detail, and then of course at the end make myself available for questions. So the addresses that we're looking at as a range are 300 to 440 Industrial Boulevard, as Maureen said. And there we go. So similar to Maureen's map, here you can see where the 300 to 400 site is located. The reason that I have 600 marked on here, but also kind of hatched out, is because we're going to be running zoning cases as Mario and Gwen know from talking for this case as well. This site does not need a future land use map amendment. It's already been changed, but they are going to be similar. So I just wanted to call that out on the exhibits. So here you can see Terrio is the cross street here. So here a little bit more zoomed in, you can also see that we're right up against the Bergstrom Spur Trail, which is exciting for the site and the area. So here is the future land use map. Again, I'm sorry, this is the zoning map. This is zoned LI and LI right now, and we'd be adding the PDA. This one is zoned LI PDA already, and we'll just be making some amendments to it. And then, like I said, on the FUM, you can see that we'll be changing this one from industry to mixed use, similar to these other sites. And then this one has already been changed to mixed use with that prior zoning case. So our zoning request, just since the two things kind of go hand in hand, I wanted to point out our zoning request is very similar to what was approved already on the 600 site, although we are asking for a little bit more height, and then both sites would match. So we'd be asking for both sites to go to 120 feet, and then the density to go to 600 on the site that we're talking about here today, the 300 to 440. And then, as is often the case with PDAs, we would be asking to add certain uses, particularly multifamily, but with other uses that are not normally allowed in LI. And then we would also be prohibiting some of the heavier uses that are allowed in LI zoning, but that would not be part of the project that we're talking about, the mixed use project that we're planning for the sites. So again, 300 to 440 is going from LI to LI PDA NP, and then 600 is going from LI PDA to LI PDA with an increase in the height to 120 and an increase in the units to 600. And then, as we often do, we wanted to take a look at the goals for the neighborhood planning area, which we've looked at before. So, the St. Elmo district is envisioned to be a very vibrant mixed use area with a lot of commercial uses and also a very pedestrian oriented environment. So we are excited to have these projects be a part of that changing area. And then also an objective to improve transit service and ridership, which of course is helped by higher density residential and commercial uses. Getting people both who are living and working in the area, but then are also using transit to get into the area, maybe for work or whatever, but knowing that those uses are going to have a higher transit ridership. And then finally, looking at the Imagine Austin plan and talking about, we all know the goals of mixed use and employment and residential. And like I said, people being able to live near where they work and where they go out for entertainment and restaurants and coffee shops and all of those things in proximity to each other. We also have the Bergstrom Trail, like I mentioned, behind the site. So there are opportunities in addition to transit for other sustainable modes to and from this area. And with that, here's my contact information for anyone who doesn't have it. And I'm certainly available to answer questions. And I have Drew Rafael with me from Jenner Group, and he's also here to help with questions. Thank you. I'll keep my screen up in case anyone wants me to go back to any slides, but you can let me know. Mario?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my understanding is, that 600 is at 90 feet, just about 90
85.
feet. Yeah, 85. Correct.
Yeah, that's right.
I rounded off to 90.
Sure.
And then so you're asking for 30 feet more in height across the board.
That's right.
Now,
we're asking for both sites to go to 120.
So there's two things that were mentioned about the Imagine Austin. That there was supposed to be lots of commercial uses.
Yes.
In this area.
Yes.
And then I think also you mentioned, well, it was one of the statements that was brought up. Oh, here it is. That ensure that the neighborhoods of modest means have a mix of local serving retail, employment opportunities, and residential uses. Encourage infill and redevelopment opportunities. Work and retail land uses in proximity of each other. So that's the problem we're having with these zoning changes because of the high cost of retail space and rental costs. We just don't have that. So what's the guarantee that you're going to give to us if this proceeds forward?
Well, with a PDA zoning case, we can't do, it does not have an affordable requirement, but I think, like you and I have talked about casually as we've gotten this project going, we are planning on having an affordable component to the project. So we don't have that figured out yet, and we'll have to work on that with an outside party. But that is the idea, that we would have an affordable component, even though the city doesn't technically require it with this zoning-based district.
Okay. And when you mentioned about the affordable component, what is that component?
We are not quite there yet, but we will be there by the time we get to our public hearings.
Okay. So for us in the past, part of our affordable component has been affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
We want to include now, because of the promises that we've had within the contact team area that have not unfolded because of high cost of rental space, and the rental space is just sitting there dormant. And then
Mhm.
per the Imagine Austin goals are not being met,
Mhm.
is a big problem that we have. So
Mhm.
we need to guarantee, and I say when we, not necessarily you, but us as a contact team working with you to guarantee that we come up with some type of rental costs for the rental spaces, and that we have rental spaces that are guaranteed for individuals that want to provide the modest means to have a mix in local serving retail and
Mhm.
employment opportunities within the residential area. We have to
Sure.
have that.
That's something we can absolutely talk about for sure.
Yes. And so we would have that in the restrictive covenant. The third thing also is that we're also looking at seniors that are retired to have a specific amount of MFI for affordability for those individuals as well.
Okay.
I will now start calling on people. This is Kathleen Fox. I'm with the City of Austin Planning Department. When I call on someone, you'll have one question, and then I will go back to people after everybody gets a turn. So let's see, I'm going to first go to the people who are raising their hand. And Howard Curtis, you have a question?
Yeah. I don't know who to address this to, but by the way, I'm Howard Curtis with the Oldham Neighborhood Association. Our neighborhood is just to the south and the west. It's between South Congress and South First, immediately south of St. Elmo. So it's probably a quarter mile from this site, but we have high interest in these developments. So I thought I heard it stated that you could now do on a property like this 120-foot building without any requirement for affordable units in the residential unit. That rather surprised me. Can you confirm that?
So we're requesting 120 feet. That's correct. And that the LIPDA zoning does not have an affordable requirement. Now, that doesn't mean we're not, like I was saying to Mario, that doesn't mean that's not something we're going to work out. But there are only certain base zoning districts that have affordable requirements. There's not one, as I understand it, that gets to 120 feet. So we will have to do that as a separate agreement.
But you're open to negotiating
Absolutely.
at that point. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Let's see. We have Gwen Jewish has the next question. Gwen, you're on mute.
Sorry. So Leah, why do we need to do this as a PDA? Because isn't it the PDA that's putting us in the category of not needing to do affordable housing?
I don't think that there's another base zoning district that gets to 120 feet. So if you look at some of those other zoning areas nearby that have similar height, they're also LIPDAs. And I think that's the reason. I think unfortunately, at this point, there's not a better option within our code.
Okay.
Hopefully there'll be a better option one of these days soon.
I am now going to go to the chat. If someone doesn't want to speak, you could also type in your question in the chat. Let's see. There's nobody asking questions. Mario, do you have another question? No,
Yes,
Howard's gone. Mario just disappeared. Do you have a question?
yes. Is Howard still there with us?
Yes, Howard
Yeah,
Curtis.
I am still here, Mario.
Okay. So I just wanted to kind of tag off of his question. So I wanted to be clear that on the 600, we do have a restrictive covenant that we worked with another applicant at that particular site and
Yes.
area that Leah is currently working on to change. Basically, when we worked with that applicant, things didn't evolve really well, and a lot of things were kind of done mainly more towards the applicant's side as opposed to ours. There were some things that the applicant did include in the restrictive covenant, but we didn't necessarily have a say so in any of the affordability. And so the affordability that took place over there is 80% MFI. So we did lose a lot of affordable housing on that particular case. Another thing that was added on there is that we were told there was going to be a brewery at that site 600, which a lot of people really wanted as well, and that some of the property on that particular site was going to be donated to the Bergstrom Spur to include for individuals to either park or be able to pull in and have a water stop on the Bergstrom Spur. So those were some things that I wanted Howard to understand and know that we're still looking at those as well, and we need to address those.
Thank you. That's helpful. So just one comment, and I don't mean this critically, but just an observation, if I might. So the Bergstrom Spur, this planned trail, is immediately north of this property. Is that correct?
That's right.
So as you walk or bicycle down the wonderful future Bergstrom Spur, when you get to this property, you're going to be confronted by a 120-foot wall to your south, correct?
120-foot building. Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. As I say, I'm not saying, we shouldn't do this because of that, but if your idea of the Bergstrom Spur is, a nice ride out into the countryside, this is not the greatest way to start it. But I'll just leave it at that.
Sure. We've been in touch with the staff that are working on the Bergstrom Spur project, and we've been talking to them about ways that we can incorporate our design into it so that it is active and it is a place where people feel safe and want to ride their bikes and walk and spend time. So we are excited about that, about our location adjacent to it, and we're working with staff on ways that we can make sure that both the trail and our design benefit from each other.
No, I think that's important. And, I think with creative thinking, you can probably achieve that.
Okay, the next question we have is Gwen Jewish again. Jewis, do you have another question, or did you just?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry if you're being thick-headed here. So 600 is already approved for 120 feet, or you're asking for 120 feet on 600?
600 is already approved for 85 feet, and we're asking for 120. But it doesn't need a change to the future land use map. The future land use map already says mixed use.
Okay. And so in asking for 125 feet on these two pieces of property, obviously that's a lot more units and a lot more income to the folks who develop this stuff. And I'd like to hear more about what's being given back to the neighborhood and the city in return for this.
Like we said, we're going to work on some affordable housing component. We have to negotiate that with an outside entity, so we haven't gotten through that yet, but that is certainly something that we would expect to be a part of this proposal. We are working with staff on the Bergstrom Trail to see how we can complement the trail and how we can design our building in a way that that makes it work and makes it successful. And then, I know I've met with you and talked with Mario and others about some other ideas that y'all have or things that could happen here. And so, we will be working on some of those things as we get closer to the public hearings. But, those are all going to have to be sort of side agreements because of the base district that we're asking for. So those will all be individually sort of negotiated, and then to Mario's point, probably put in a restrictive covenant.
Okay, and when you're talking about the outside entities for the affordable housing, is that for just managing and monitoring once the building's up and running?
And enforcing it. So whenever you do an agreement like that, you have to have two parties. You have to have the party that's the landowner or the developer, and then you also have to have the party that's making sure they do what they said they're going to do. So that's part of what we'll have to figure out is who would want to be that enforcing group or person, and it's always a little complicated when it can't be the city. When it's the city, it's very straightforward, obviously, but when it has to be with someone else, that's part of what we have to kind of get through. But we always do. We always figure it out. I'm sure we will here too.
Okay, and I just don't know off the top of my head, are there requirements for all the properties that abut the Bergstrom Spur, just like, you have different requirements if you're on a main corridor as opposed to a residential street and so on? Are there specific things for the Bergstrom Spur that are required for you all to do?
No, there's not anything specific to that trail. That trail is being funded on its own. As I think y'all know, in phases. And so, we want to, like I said, we want to, help it, and we want it to help this project be kind of complementary. But there isn't any special requirement other than just the regular things you'd have to do. We'll have to pay street impact fees, for example, based on the number of units, the amount of commercial space. That comes later to go into traffic and transportation improvements. All that kind of regular stuff, but there's not anything in particular. This is a right of way, and so they're building that project within the right of way.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm sorry for my ignorance.
No problem.
Howard, did you have another question?
I was just thinking of one, and you're probably not at this point in your planning process, but when I look at this, the location of this site and think about how many units did you say it would be?
600 on each parcel.
Okay.
I should say up to 600. That would
So
be the max.
So I'm sure there'll be a very large parking garage as part of the development, whether above ground or below ground. But it would look to me like the traffic would have to initially, coming in both into and out of the complex, it couldn't get directly to South Congress. It would have to go down Industrial Boulevard, presumably to a traffic light, or it would have to go kind of around the corner and up whatever the street is that runs up to Ben White. People could, especially if they were going east, they could go up to Ben White and take a right-hand turn. But has there been at this point any thought or analysis about the traffic impacts?
We are going through that process right now, and we'll be going through it in more detail when we get to the site plan stage. But that's, there will be an analysis of that. We are hoping for a kind of a shared parking agreement so that, people can come in if they're using, whether they, live there or whether they're coming to use some of the commercial uses and things, or, the trail or whatever, that they would be able to park once. We're hoping to have everything kind of be fluid and work together. So when we get to the site plan is when that really has to get nailed down, but the city is looking at trips and things like that at this stage as well, just to know. And then, like I said, we pay a street impact fee to the city to do transportation improvements based on how much gets built. Because, this zoning case kind of sets the maximums for how much, square footage and density and units and all those things that can be built. And so then when you come in with your site planning, much more specifically what you're building. That's when it gets more detailed, the driveway locations, all that stuff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm checking the chat if there's any questions. I don't see any. Someone's raising their hand again. Let's see. We have Gwen again.
So, Leah, I don't think it was in a conversation with you. I think it was in a conversation with Amanda recently,
Okay.
where we were, but you know, same general group, us and you guys, and so that people can understand what 120 feet looks like in comparison to the neighborhoods that are to the south. Obviously, you know, you don't have building elevations and so on or anything of that sort, but just as a very diagrammatic thing, is that something that you could supply that, you know, sort of includes, you know, the topography of the area, because all of this stuff sort of slopes down to Williamson Creek, but just so that everybody can understand what 125 feet is from here.
Absolutely.
Neighborhood.
Yes, and we are still working on how to convey that. We did do some measurements to the closest single family, and it looks like some of the single family to the south, I mean, just is in length, is located, you know, about 1,500 to 2,000 feet away. But we are working on how to show diagrammatically like what it would look like from down there, or like a comparison or something like that. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And just for the audience, how many floors is 120 feet?
It's probably 10 or maybe 11 floors, depending on how tall, you know, how tall each floor is.
And the ground floor retail especially is usually
Right.
taller, but
The retail, exactly. Retail will be taller, and then the building, the if it's office versus if it's residential, the floor heights vary a little bit.
And if any of you are familiar with the building the planning department used to be in, One Texas Center, that is a 13-story building.
Okay.
Okay. So Mario has a question.
Yes, just Leah, is there any consideration that there would be a hotel attached to this project at all, or is it just all rental units?
I think right now we're talking about commercial, like office and residential, but I can look into further if hotel would be permitted or if there's any interest in that happening. I'm happy to look into that and get back to you.
But if you get the PDA, you will be able to, right?
I'd have to look and see. I think it would be an allowed use, but I would have to make sure. I would want to make sure of that. But yeah, I believe hotel is allowed in LI. So unless we explicitly prohibited it, I believe it would be permitted.
Yeah, because I think we mentioned this before. The PDA just kind of gives you a free-for-all zoning across the board.
It starts with LI, and then you have to add or remove uses from there. So like on that slide where I showed the things that had been prohibited, like the heavier stuff that, you know, wouldn't belong in a mixed use area, like recycling centers and things like that. So we pull out those things, and then you can also add uses like residential, which isn't normally allowed.
Okay. And then also, I think a lot of these things that we mentioned, we probably need to get with you before we get to Planning Commission.
For sure. For sure. And we've got plenty of time on that front. We're not scheduled, and we have lots of time before we get there, but we'll be in touch with you about some of these other details before we get there.
Yeah. And I think the height's going to be an issue because, you know, comparing the buildings that we have currently right now, as opposed to what you specifically want, and maybe somebody else wants, is going to be totally different.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
Your hand's still up, Mario. Do you have another question?
No, thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Does anybody have any further questions of the agents? I'm going to check the chat and see if anybody typed anything up. Nobody typed up a question.
Actually, I do have another question. Sorry.
Okay.
In this, sorry, I was used to more working down in the central business district when thinking about buildings of this scale. So, I don't know, and again, I'm sorry for my ignorance on this one, but in this LIPDA, are there requirements for any setbacks of any nature? Obviously you're not going to have a lot of yard areas or anything like that. And then knowing that we're going to be also somewhat limited by having the Bergstrom Spur on the north side of the property, then we need to understand, and it's too early to understand that now, but we all need to think about where would be sort of the garage entrance and the trash pickup and all those sorts of things as well.
Sure.
So
those are definitely more site planning questions, the garage entrances and things like that. But the setbacks, these are the setbacks that were in that other ordinance that was approved in 2020 that I mentioned. And so we're proposing to just keep those the same.
Okay, so we'd have 10 feet basically out at the Bergstrom Spur sign, whatever that 10 feet looks like, we don't know yet, but okay.
That's right. And there would also be, there would be building articulation. We're talking about putting some courtyards in and things like that in that area so that it wouldn't just be like 10 feet off the property line. There's just the wall that goes the whole way through. Like I said, we're really working with staff to try to, face that trail and make it an integral part of the development. So, those are design questions that come later, but that's the idea. That's what we're planning on, and that's what we're talking with the Urban Trail staff about.
Cool.
Mario, do you have another question?
Nope. Let me take that hand. Let me take the hand away.
So
there you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're at 6:42. I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to say, yes, I have another question, or speak now or forever hold your peace.
Or you can always email me or call me or Drew.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah,
I know, but that this is recorded for people who couldn't be here. So it's really helpful if people air it out so people could come to this meeting, can see the meeting, and hopefully their question will be answered.
Yeah, and I just think, when there's more information known about what the development will have included in it, then we'll have a lot more questions. But at this time, it's a little early.
Hey, Maureen, is there any way you could put up Miss Bojo's information? If anybody has any questions, they can contact her on the screen.
Or I can do that, Maureen.
Yeah, she can put her slide up. I don't have that. And after she puts up her slide, I'll go over next steps.
Okay, great.
Sounds good.
So
Sorry,
this is Howard. I just had one last comment, not really a question.
Sure.
Given the scale of development in this St. Elmo area and all of South Congress between Ben White and Stastny, it's extremely unfortunate that the scaling back of Project Connect likely will not cause the light rail system to go, at least initially, south of Old Torf. It also won't go to the airport, which I think is a disaster, but that's a separate matter. Anyway, I guess I wish, and this is my editorial comment, I wish that rather than say, oh, we no longer have enough money because of inflation to do what we set out to do with light rail, so we got to scale it back. I wish we said or asked, where can we get another $5 billion so we can do this thing right? And that would help all these projects on South Congress.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it for me.
I hear you. I hear you on that.
I
Okay,
think we're
everybody-
ready for the next steps, Marie.
Okay, so I put up my contact info. So again, here's my contact info and Nancy Estrada's, the zoning planner's information. So the next step, my team will meet and we will make a recommendation on the plan amendment request to go from industry to mixed use. After I will report to my team the discussion tonight, the questions, the answers, etc. Then I will, after we make a recommendation on the proposed flum change, we'll pass that on to Nancy. She will meet with her team and they will make a recommendation on the proposed zoning request. Once we have a finalized staff recommendation, which I don't have an estimate of when that would happen, but y'all can periodically touch base with me to see how it's moving forward. But once we get a finalized staff recommendation, we will work with Leah and her client and scheduling the cases for Planning Commission and City Council. I'll work with Mario and the planning contact team once we get that date on when we would need their, or when we would like to have their letter of recommendation if they want it included in the staff case report. It is to have in the staff case report, we needed 1 week before the proposed planning commission hearing date. So, but we can keep everybody posted once that starts moving forward. But at this time, there's no proposed public hearing dates. Any questions on the process?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So I will stop sharing my screen. So I guess if there's no more questions, we can, in the meeting, we can ask one last time before we log off. Any more questions? Nope.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kathleen.